Shou-Lao, Shou-Lao, Shou-Lao. The Season Pass card's power level, it's easy to believe that this was the only card that came out this week, but actually, there were 3 whole more cards that are all actually kind of interesting too. So let's take a look at them. I'm KMBest, and I definitely did not wait until I decayed to this number to put my rank into a video. Remember to like and subscribe if you want to support the channel. First up is Lockheed. Lockheed, a 2/1 with an end of turn ability that gives -2 to a card at Lockheed's location if you played a 1-cost card at any location on turn. This is actually a fairly reasonable card. It's just we aren't in a fairly reasonable meta. So you need to find something to do with Lockheed that makes him unreasonable. That's the fundamental premise here. In a normal world, which we haven't been in for a little bit, a fair enough card like this would be a reasonable, fine thing to do. In the world we live in, it's competing with Shou-Lao Maverick, it's competing with multiple Victoria hands, it's competing with ways to multiply buffs in ways that are non-linear, and Lockheed is fundamentally a linear card. I think this is a concept that people should grasp from the beginning of Marvel Snap. Just look at a card like Iron Man and then look at a card like Hulk. It's not actually a surprise that the card that can multiplicatively scale is the one of those 2 cards that is still played at endgame level decks. That level of multiplicative scaling is what power can be built around in Marvel Snap, whereas a linear scaler like Lockheed often relies on tech cards in order to make sure that it doesn't get outscaled by something that can go multiplicative. The other problem Lockheed has is that it's a linear scaler that is not the best linear scaler, because often the best linear scaler is able to be supplemented by cards like that. I think you could argue that Werewolf by Night in this current metagame is the best linear scaler, and Lockheed actually sort of goes with Werewolf by Night in that they both want you to play a lot of 1-cost, especially skills, but really just 1-cost cards, but also sort of doesn't, because Lockheed wants you to be a Kitty Pryde deck, Werewolf doesn't exactly want you to be a Kitty Pryde deck. Lockheed also goes with Shou-Lao himself, which is a good thing, but I'm not entirely positive that Lockheed is making those Shou-Lao decks better. I would in fact probably take the other side of that bet if I was forced to bet on it. So on the whole, this is a reasonable card, but we aren't in a very reasonable meta. So what can you do with Lockheed? Well, let's take a look at some decks. The easiest thing to do with Lockheed is take a deck that is going to make Lockheed unreasonable. That's what Invisible Woman First Steps is doing. I think he's actually a really nice addition to this list. Any card that is an end of turn that works this well with what this deck is already doing. There are 4 1-drops in this deck. Really, it's 3 that typically go with this, but getting Kitty Pryde in here isn't even bad because Kitty Pryde allows you to do a bunch of really cool prodigy positioning type of things. It's actually like kind of an upside here. This deck really does actually like what Lockheed has to offer. You can do a lot more unique final turn stuff if you don't draw your exact copies of Havoc and things of that nature. It is a worse scaler than Havoc. No arguments here. 2 is a smaller number than 3, but it is still a pretty good card to have for cheap. People used to play Bruce Banner, for example, in the slot. Lockheed is very clearly better than that to me. I know that's not the biggest, most ringing endorsement of the card, but it is notable. Like, this is okay. We're actually getting a meaningful upgrade to what would normally be in this deck by putting this card in this deck. And the more end of turns we have, the less we become just a Havoc and Thena and Sunspot bot, and the more this deck can actually just output a lot of power. That's really what this deck is built to do. We have entered the combo mode of this archetype. This is just all the synergy pieces that work with Invisible Woman First Steps, Jocasta to multiply it, and Fantasticar as your backup Invisible Woman First Steps, because all of your synergy pieces also work with that. It is literally just that simple. You put big numbers on the board. You do have to worry about the card Deafening Chord, very powerful. Cosmic Ghost Rider, very powerful. All that stuff is real against the board-based combo-ish deck. But I do think that if you're looking for a good Lockheed home, this is the deck that gets the most out of being a Lockheed deck. Where I think other Lockheed decks, it's like, okay, I'll put him in Thanos, but I could just play Iron Patriot. Or I'll put him in a Shou-Lao deck, but I could just play Iron Patriot. You kind of get where I'm going with this, right? This is what it looks like when you try to lean as far as you can into one costy stuff with this card. It is debatable, I think, whether this is actually an upgrade over a typical Shou-Lao deck. And by debatable, I mean, if you forced me to bet on it, I would bet that it isn't. This is not to say that this is a bad thing to do, just that maybe if you played more of a stock Shou-Lao list, you might have a better time climbing. Largely, I think that this is a very reasonable deck, and if you want an excuse to play some off-meta-ish kind of things that, since they're still Shou-Lao cards, are still really good, this is a very reasonable thing to try. I think this is a good deck. There is nothing wrong with what this deck is trying to do, but it's not enough to just be a good deck when you enter the arena of the best decks, right? If you're playing a Shou-Lao deck, you probably want to be playing the best Shou-Lao deck because your opponents might be, and if you have a worse Shou-Lao deck than them, well, that's not a really good mirror match for you, is it? So this is largely to say that I think this is a reasonable thing to do, but there are kind of a shocking amount of anti-synergies between Werewolf and this card, where it's like, okay, first of all, Lockheed really wants you to play Kitty Pryde. You get the repeatable stuff. Shou-Lao covers that, so you're like, fine. You probably want to play Kitty Pryde in your Shou-Lao deck anyway. I don't think Werewolf wants to be a Kitty Pryde card. I don't think Werewolf necessarily wants to be a Lockheed card either. They just happen to feed off of the same things, so one gets to back up the other. I think that's largely what the deck building here is about. You just have a bunch of cards that feed off the same things, and those things largely in your good games are one-cost spells that these cards make, right? And so if you have a bunch of one-cost spells that these cards make, all your cards feed off of those things, and you get to roll downhill. You have your enablers, you have your payoffs, you just do a bunch of points, you do a bunch of really cool stuff. There's nothing wrong with deck building like that, but there is a little bit of clunk in this engine in that sometimes you end up in a situation where your hand is like Werewolf, Kitty Pryde, and you're like, well, these two cards just don't work. So, like, you have stuff like that where you really have to make some relatively harder decisions. And in order to facilitate this whole group of cards going in here, is really only one spot for a tech card. And this deck's really bad at playing Shadow King. So Shang-Chi is in there, but I don't know if we can afford it because he costs 4. It's a little bit awkward. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it's not. Like, the fact that there's so many green and red power effects in this deck. Your green effects like Nick Scratch, your red effects like getting Prowler minuses onto stuff, your Lockheeds onto stuff, Joaquin Torresing, that kind of stuff. You have a lot of green stuff across a lot of different lanes and some red stuff you want to keep there as well, so you just aren't a good Shadow King deck. I think there's something to this list. I just don't know if it's best Shou-Lao deck material. Next up is Majestic Wingbeat, a 1-cost skill that has an on reveal, giving the leftmost card in your hand +2 power. If it costs 5 or more, that is its cost, not what it costs in hand. It's actual inbuilt, the number on the card. It will get -1 cost. So this is actually a card I think people are a little bit low on. I've been just generally pretty impressed with this. You just saw it in the previous deck, right? Like, this is a card that I'm probably higher on than general population. I see this card and I see a card that I like putting in my Werewolf deck. I like putting in a bunch of different spots. I'm very happy to do a wide variety of things with. Generally speaking, I like what this card is offering. So there are a couple of real shells here. The first is sort of a Werewolf mid-rangey type of thing. The second is you put it in like a combo deck, a Zombie Galacti, Galactus style list, where what it's doing is trying to make your end game combo much more efficient and powerful. Those are really the two modes this card exists in. So let's take a look at a couple of lists. List number 1 is a list that I've already put on this channel once, but I do think it's really worth talking about the way in which this card works very well with the Mockingbird Sasquatch package, because it just lets you do some very cool things. This is neither a Wolf mid-range deck nor a Galacti combo deck, but I do think it's in pretty much the same mental space as a Wolf mid-range deck. And for example, if you're looking for the Wolf mid-range deck, I mean, Just look at the video, rewind the video to where we were talking about the last deck in the previous section, and then you have a Wolf mid-range deck with a Majestic Wingbeat in it, and I really don't think you need much more than that. So this is a more interesting, but I think ultimately a little bit flawed implementation of the concept. Largely, if anything holds this deck back, it's that the Mysterio plan does not mesh perfectly with the Shou-Lao plan. Because there's a lot of power in here, and there's a lot to be said for optimizing for your 22 power Scarlet Spiders or 17 power Mavericks or whatever. That stuff is sick. You're super into doing it, but it's just, you know, not exactly perfect with the way the deck normally wants to play. Because typically, if you want to be doing the Scarlet Spider thing, it's a turn 6 Shou-Lao angle. That doesn't work with Mysterio stuff. It doesn't work with Mockingbird Sasquatch, which really wants you to be playing Mysterio on turn 5, which is the turn you have to play Scarlet Spider. So you got to get the Merlin spell to get you extra energy, which then means you got to play Mysterio to actually make the Merlin spell have targets. And it's a whole bunch going on here. But largely what I want to point out is that Majestic Wingbeat is kind of amazing here. It is going to buff cards that need buffs and scale off buffs. Scarlet Spider and Maverick, happy to hit it with that. Happy to hit a Mysterio with that. That turns it into +6 power. You're super happy with that. You're happy to hit a Sasquatch with that. You're happy to hit a Mockingbird with that. It doesn't matter what they say they cost in your hand. It'll work. You're happy to hit a Shou-Lao with that. All of that stuff it's got a bunch of really good targets in this deck, is basically what I'm getting at here. Tons of great targets. This deck, I think, is actually close. I'm going to be 100% honest. I don't think this exact conception may ever get there, but it's really close to something that will get there. Majestic Wingbeat, a big upgrade to Zombie Galacti. This is a very powerful list that Jaywala took all the way to rank 1. Again, though, what we're looking at here is not just, oh, I must hit my Zombie Galacti here. It's all the other stuff, too. Granted, hitting your Zombie Galacti is what this card is in here to do. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that it isn't. But in a world where you don't have to worry about 60% of decks playing Merlin, which is not the world we live in, and you can't really count on Magic right now, you still play her just because sometimes you can, but you can't really count on her. That is a very okay thing to be doing on, say, a Maverick, right? This is a deck that obviously really wants to use it on Zombie Galacti specifically, but largely what you're doing here is just pressing the output button. You want to make sure that you play as many cards as you can that have the Zombie Galacti effect on them, and then make Zombie Galacti as big as possible and as playable as possible. Since Magic is not reliable, using Wingbeat to make the card 6 cost is honestly, in my opinion, just better. Like, even outside of the additional bonus that it gives, which is effectively +2 to every card with the transform attached to it, just not having to be a Magic deck is like the biggest thing that you can get out of this. Not being a Magic deck is so powerful. Every Shou-Lao deck is a Merlin deck. The decks that aren't Shou-Lao decks, the people are still playing ramp decks. Those are Legion decks. There are more anti-Magic cards in this metagame than I think I've ever seen. Don't fall victim to that. You cannot count on that card. You be really sure that you're going to be safe with your Magics, because that is one of the biggest risks to this deck, and it's a big part of what this card, Majestic Wingbeat, can mitigate for this deck, is the risk of that. Don't force yourself to be a Magic deck if it's not going to make sense for you. Last up is Dragon of the Moon, which is a 3/2 that steals a power from all even cost cards in all hands. This is probably the weakest of the cards that came out, but it does do a couple of generally pretty interesting things. I originally thought this would be a 1-star card. I think looking at it, it's pretty clearly in the second quintile of things here, which is to say it's like a 2-star card if I were grading it in that way. It's a little bit better than I thought it would be. That's not to say it's actually all that good. There's a reason that it's the last card on this video, and there's a reason that I'm probably going to spend the least time talking about it, but it is still an interesting card. First up, we have the Safety Blade Master Mold Ronin list. This is sort of just like the basic version of what a Dragon of the Moon deck looks like. What really sticks out to me about this list, though, is that, and I know this is going to sound weird, Master Mold Ronin is actually just like quite good against Merlin Kitty Pryde decks. It's not necessarily good enough for you to like win those matchups all the time, but when a lot of Shou-Lao matchups turn into who drew Shou-Lao, being able to make sure your opponent didn't draw as many cards as you actually does kind of help. And I think that like that is like kind of a relevant thing that this deck is accessing that very few other decks in the metagame are accessing. I also want to give a shout out to Iceman, who's just like pretty damn solid about this whole deal. I almost want to lean into this further and go like Iceman, Spider-Ham, Cable, Master Mold package, and then just be like, I am more consistently accessing my Shou-Lao than you are. And like, I kind of wonder if there's actually a legitimate ethos behind deck building in that way. I'm not sure what that means for the state of the metagame, but I genuinely do wonder. And I think that largely what this speaks to is not just that Shou-Lao is centralizing, but that the way his decks are built are centralizing. A lot of Shou-Lao decks are like A plus B, right? Like they're not exactly Jocasta Invisible Woman, but they're not far removed from that. It's a sort of combo deck nested within a mid-range deck where, you know, sometimes your Invisible Woman, when that deck was good, was just like a 3/5 that had like a bunch of additional procs attached to it. So it like averaged out to being like a 3/15 or whatever. That's sort of like what Shou-Lao is doing, where it's like, okay, well, you're not comboing it, but it's still like a 5/17, you know, like you're happy with that. That's the dynamic here, right? And then like the Jocasta in the situation would of course be, you know, Maverick or Scarlet Spider or whatever it is you're doing to multiply the Shou-Lao buff, right? That's kind of the way it works, right? And if you're able to take your opponent off of that, that is meaningful. Like I do think that's meaningful. But you'll notice I've spent this whole time talking about that and like no time talking about Dragon of the Moon, who is fine, but like in as much as I like this deck, it's not because of Dragon of the Moon. It's just the specific interaction with other Shou-Lao decks. So I'm not sure if this is an endorsement or not. If you are a true griefer, Splat has done it again. A modified version of, I think this is fair to say, the Jet Phoenix Force deck. Obviously, there's no actual Phoenix Force in here, but the premise is basically the same. You're looping Firehair things with revives and then killing them off and repeating their on reveals. Dragon of the Moon, of course, does fit the type of card that is that kind of thing. The big thing that that deck is really interested in is cards whose on reveal adds green power to them. This deck is going to fill your hand up and make it very small. Between Master Mold, Scorpion, Dragon of the Moon, all of that stuff, a bunch of garbage is going to go into your hand. And some power is going to go onto your Dragon of the Moon. And sometimes a bunch of garbage is going to go in your deck, thanks to Cassandra Nova. It's a full griefer list that also just generally has a couple of reasonable combo lines in it. Things like play Master Mold into Dragon of the Moon, misery that lane, revive the Dragon of the Moon with the Adamantium Infusion and Zola it. That's a lot of actual power. Is it enough to win every game? Probably not. But it does stuff. And again, we talk about like Maverick and Scarlet Spider being Shou-Lao enablers. We talk about how good it is to disrupt your opponent's hand flow in a deck that plays Merlin Kitty Prydes very often. I can see this kind of thing actually being pretty relevant. I'm not saying this is like a deck that's going to be a meta deck or anything, but I am saying that if you're in the mood to grief some people and you don't mind playing a bit of a jank pile, this'll work. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for watching. As always, I have been KMBest. You have been phenomenal. And I will see you in the next one.